of women's writing, we will have the critical preconceptions that the work will talk about something which is being talked about every work.
They are trying to emancipate reading or appreciation of poetry from all sorts of preconceived notions or conditioning of the mind. Now let us look at three major elements of the theory of art that I.A. Richards talked about and which influenced the new critical school. The first is the difference between scientific and emotive language. Richards said that scientific language is the language which expresses general truths, that is, which refers only to reality. However, the language used in poetry is emotive language, and therefore, it is focused not on referring to truth but on invoking certain emotions, attitudes, and interests inside the reader, and that is how poetry does not make a statement of truth, rather, poetry makes a pseudo statement. This takes us to the next slide. What is poetry? A poetry is a pseudo statement. When we discussed the influence of modernism, we saw how it was difficult for people to base their thinking on earlier beliefs, values, or to have complete belief in something, because the everything that tied them to old conventions, to old sureties and certainties was going out of their hands, and therefore he says that it is not possible to have any general reference to any absolute and established truth anymore. Rather, we can only make pseudo statements. It is a pseudo statement in the sense that it is true only insofar as it can evoke certain attitudes and emotions within us as well, the same emotions and attitudes that the poet underwent, and therefore here logic is subordinate to the emotional responses that it evokes. Therefore, poetic language does not need to be logical in nature. Logic comes secondary, even if a poem seems illogical or badly structured or is inhibiting in terms that it is not allowing you to arrive at its meaning or its experience at once. That is fine as far as you are experiencing the same emotions and attitudes that the writer underwent while undergoing that experience. The next and final insight that we have is the unity of the work of art. This again is an influence of modernism, as we can see. Richards talked about the concept of synesthesis. Therefore, he said that a work of art is talking about or brings into harmony all the impulses and attitudes that we see around us or that we gather from the normal world. For a normal person, these attitudes and impulses would be conflicting in nature, but for a poet, he has the possibility to harmonize these attitudes. He gives the example of tragedy and says that in tragedy, the impulse to approach someone, that is pity, and the impulse to retreat from someone, that is fear, are brought together, and that is what brings the unitary experience of catharsis to a person. Therefore, an artist has the capacity to harmonize experience, and this is what he communicates to the reader. These are all the factors that were taken from this English school of practical criticism by certain American critics, and all these practices came to be institutionalized in what came to be known as the New Criticism School in America, which was widely popular during the first half of the 20th century. Let us look at the tenets of New Criticism. First slide tells us what is New Criticism.
Post-World War I school of Anglo-American literary critical theory that insisted on the intrinsic value of a work of art and focused attention on the individual work alone as an independent unit of meaning. It states that this means that when we talk about new criticism, whenever a work is given, we should not consider the responses or the preconceived notions. We should rather look at work as an independent unit of meaning.
Should I go to the next?
The next slide. The next slide states that it was opposed to the critical practice of bringing historical or biographical data to bear on the interpretation of the work. Whenever we are given a piece of work, rather than going into the depth and looking at a lot of historical details that this work was written in the year XYZ, therefore this must be the theme of this work, we should just enjoy the piece of work that the author or the writer wants to present to us. This results in the fact that it does not snatch away the essence in which the work is written. As I have stated before, whenever we are given a piece of women's writing, we always associated certain kinds of historical details. Rather, if we just read the work, we will come to the conclusion that every piece of women's writing is not all about domestic violence. This is what the new critics focused on, that rather than going forward with a lot of unnecessary details, we should always try to read the work as an individual unit, oblivious of any other fact. Next slide please, ma'am. Some major critiques were John Crowe Ransom. Actually, he was the main critic who came up with the name or the name given to the school of thought, which is the New Criticism. It was given in his book, which was published in the year 1941. The name of the book itself was the New Criticism. As stated before by Bageshri, that T.S. Eliot was another person who is considered to be a pioneer of the movement. His theories on objective correlative, which means using images to talk about particular issues. For example, in Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, he uses the image of time to show that time is the only thing that is not constant in Prufrock's life. Rest of his life is entirely paralyzed, just as the patient etherized on a table. So use of these imagery, they allow the work to flourish in a more aesthetic manner. Hence he is considered to be one of the major critics of the New Criticism.
I feel that this is what we have mentioned when we talked about the biographical or historical information, as well as the pitfall of sentimentalism that Richards talks about. That when you read a poem, do not try to arrive at the intention of the author. That is what is referred to as the intentional fallacy. That is the fault of trying to arrive at the intention. And the second is becoming overpowered by the emotions that the poem is evoking. This is also known as the affective fallacy. And the two critics who gave us these two terms were W.K. Wimsatt and Munro Beardsley. So if we have to sum up, the four tenets of New Criticism would be, first of all, that form is all-encompassing and that form and content are inseparable. Third is that literary language is superior, and fourth is that the text is central. We have talked about the superiority of literary language so far. Let us look at the first 2 points. When we say that form is all-encompassing, the critic is trying to say that the process of reading the poem, the order in which one experiences the emotions and impulses, and the order in which they were recreated is the same order in which the reader should be able to follow the aesthetic experience, and therefore this can only be conveyed by the form and not the referential message conveyed by the poem. And the final point, which is also considered to be the central tenet of New Criticism, is that the text is central. That is, they look at the work of art in isolation, the object in itself, as the phrase is used. Would you like to speak about that?
The text is considered as a whole. Here we can take the previous 2 points, the affective fallacy and the intentional fallacy, which means that a writer and the emotions of the writers and other historical details, whenever they are taken, they mess up a particular piece of work. Hence the text and only the text should be seen as the center point which the reader should focus on.
To sum up, therefore, one could say that practical criticism and New Criticism had their own set of limitations. They were not entirely correct in ignoring all relations with or all links or connections with the outside world, for example the political, social or moral concerns of a text, and focusing simply on the literary form. However, their influence has been great. They have influenced the school of stylistics and many other subsequent currents of criticism. And the textbook criticism especially, or the classroom criticism, is what emanates out of this school of criticism. Therefore, we hope that in this lecture we have made this school of criticism less intimidating and daunting for the students. We also have a list of references for further reading regarding these school of criticisms. These are the 4 texts which the students can avail and read further about these 2 schools. Hope we have been able to clarify the central tenets and dissipate certain myths regarding these 2 schools of criticism. On that note, I would like to thank you for your attention and wish you all the best with further reading and decoding of the various schools of literary criticism you may find in your study of English literature.
Thank you.
Sandhan, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.